Okay, it's ready.
Outstanding. Good morning, friends, and welcome to the April meeting of the Continuing Advisory Committee for Special Education for the state of Texas. My name is Jen Stratton, and I am proud to serve as your committee chair. We do have a couple of quick items to remind our currently serving members and to inform our new members, which I am very excited to be able to greet today, of some of our meeting guidelines. Most of these are common sense and good manners, but I think we can all agree that having a reminder is never a bad idea. Firstly, we're listening to each other with respect, which has never, ever been a problem for this group. We respect the diversity in the group. One person speaks at a time. I would remind everyone to please silence all technology that is not pertinent to this meeting. We are to be open and honest and observe confidentiality. Brevity is the spice of life, even for me. And obviously, we're working hard for the people of Texas and especially our special needs friends. As we do have new members joining us. Good morning. I'd like to ask those of the members of the committee to just go around really quickly and introduce ourselves. Agatha, I'm going to ask you to start.
Oh, okay. My mute was off. I'm Agatha Thibodeau. I have, this is going to be my second term on the committee. I am the mother of a special needs son who is 14 years old. He has autism. I'm happy with this committee. It's a wonderful committee. The people are very dedicated to helping Texas students.
Thank you, Agatha. And Agatha is also our board secretary and keeps us all running smoothly and makes us all look fantastic. I am deeply in her debt. Joanne.
Good morning. My name's Joanne Wofford. This is also my second term. I am the parent of a young adult now. My son is a triplet and also an identical twin in the triplet set. He is in a transition program called Gateway that is offered through New Braunfels Independent School District. I live in New Braunfels. I am also a full-time working mom, and I'm happy to serve on this second term, and I as well think that this is an important committee.
Dr. Estrada, can you introduce yourself? Thank you, Joanne. Always a pleasure to see you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm April Estrada. I'm the Director of Special Populations here at Region 10 up in the Dallas area. This is my first term and my second meeting, but the first one I just got to jump on for an introduction. So I'm happy to be here and so grateful to be serving along such an amazing group.
Fantastic. We're glad to have you here. The incomparable and fabulous Amy Litzinger.
Hi, I'm Amy Litzinger. I'm here in Austin, and I am your vice chair, and I am the self-advocate of the group. And I'm glad to be here for my second term.
Always a pleasure to see your face, my friend. Susan.
Hello, I am Susan Nichols. This is also my almost second term, I guess. I joined a little late last year. I am currently serving as the executive director at the University of North Texas, Kristen Farmer Autism Center. And I have a background as a special educator and also work as a behavior analyst. So I'm happy to be here, part of this group.
Thank you, Susan. Barbie.
Good morning. I'm Barbie Zill. I'm the Director of Special Education, Dyslexia, and 504 for Gregory Portland ISD, which is near Corpus Christi. And this is my first term, and I'm excited to be here as well.
Always happy to have you. Shamika. Shamika, are you with us?
Oh, wait, I was muted. Sorry. No camera today right now. I'm either in my second or third term. I am the educator on the group. I'm also the owner of Personalized Learning Solutions, which is an advocacy firm. I have also been the co-chair, vice co-chair, and secretary for this committee in the past.
We are glad to have you in any capacity, as you know. Aaron, I'd like to invite you to come here and introduce yourself. We have a new board member, Aaron Banger.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Bangor. I'm a new member representing the position of a parent of children with disabilities. Normally what I do is I'm a user researcher with AT&T, studying how to make products and services more user-friendly with a focus on inclusive design and user experience. I'm also chair of Disability in Central Texas, which is a local affiliate of Disability In, which is a business-to-business organization focused on inclusion of people with disabilities in the workforce and marketplace. I've had the good fortune, I just wrapped up 15 years with the Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. Fortunately, wanted to make some room for somebody else on that committee, but very fortunate to be able to come over here and continue to work for Texans with disabilities and especially children with disabilities. So good to see some familiar faces. I'm happy to get to meet all of you that I haven't met before.
Thank you, Aaron. And now I'd like to introduce Diane Nelson.
Good morning. My name is Deanna Nelson. I'm so tall. This is my first term. I'm a special education coordinator for the Texas Juvenile Justice Department, and I've been in education all my life. So, thank you.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? Seeing not, everyone should have had their agenda emailed to them by Keith. I would ask, rather than go through it all right now, not that there's an extensive agenda today, I would just ask everyone to simply reference that. I'd like to remind anyone who is attending from the public that our public comment sign-in has already begun, and we would ask anyone who is interested in signing up for public comment to please do so by 9:30 this morning. Next on our agenda, we're going to be talking about probably the most important work that our committee does, and certainly the most diverting. Let's talk about some legislative reporting. This is
Actually, Jen,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Is it really okay if Justin goes ahead?
absolutely.
Yeah, because that way he can do his presentation and then.
What, Justin, you don't want to come and see how the sausage gets made?
Of course I do. Of course I do. Always happy. Always happy. And I'm a huge barbecue fan. So sausage is always a good thing. Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Justin Porter, Associate Commissioner for Special Populations Programs and Policy at TEA. Part of that role is serving as State Director for Special Education. And so welcome new members and howdy to old friends. Aaron, great to see you here. Aaron and I have served together on the Texas Council. Not TCDD. That's a different thing I do. Governor's Committee for People with Disabilities. So great to see you here, Aaron. Thanks for giving me a little bit of time this morning. Keith let me know that y'all had some interest in a little letter that you received from the federal government you were copied on. So this is for just for the group's quick little background. States are required to engage in a process called maintenance of financial support, and at different times throughout the IDEA's sort of inception, states have agreed upon with the federal government a methodology for calculating their maintenance of financial support. The law requires that states do not go backwards in their funding for special education. So you cannot provide less one year than you provided in a previous year from the state level for funding for schools for special education. And so it's a pretty straightforward piece of the law, but it gets to be very complicated in how that methodology has been worked out between the states and the federal government. Every state does it slightly differently. So the way that funding works in Texas for schools is that schools code kiddos based right now based on placement, where those kids actually sit and receive their services, determines how much funding they draw down. As an aside, the state legislature has, for the last couple of sessions, had keen interest in revising how that funding model, because it's been in place since the 90s. And those of us who work in special education know that special education isn't a place, it's a service, and that service can happen in any geographic location within the school building or outside of the school. And so it's time to make a change, and the legislature has recognized that for quite some time. So in the last legislative session, they required that we put together, actually the legislature put together a legislative commission to look at special education funding. And so that group has had their first meeting. They have another meeting next week, and their charge is to provide the 88th legislative session with a recommendation on how to change how schools receive funding for special education. As part of that conversation, they want to make sure that we don't run into an issue with this maintenance of financial support, which brings us back to the April 4th letter that y'all were copied on. Over the last 10 years, I guess, there have been 3 years in question with regard to whether or not Texas actually met its requirement for maintenance of financial support. 2012, make sure I don't get this wrong, I've got the letter up in front of me. This letter doesn't touch on 2012 because that's already been dealt with in a different letter, but then also 2017 and 2018. They cited us for having a shortfall in maintenance of financial support. For the 2012 amount, which was covered in a previous letter, we've already worked through. And so what happens when a state doesn't meet its requirement there is that the federal government then tries to claw back that amount of money out of your IDEA B allocation. And so they do that in various different ways. The 2012 amount was 33 million, maybe 33, 340, something like that. That we had a shortfall, and we as a state decided that we would rather have it all taken out of this year's allocation, because what the 87th legislature did for us was put sort of a backstop in place that would allow for us to, if we were felt like we were going to miss MFS, there's just sort of a way for us to dump more funds into the system in that current year in order to make sure that we don't have an issue. And then it also put into place some money in case the federal government decided that they were going to claw back this money, so that school districts wouldn't feel the pinch of this at all. So basically for that 2012, $33 million, the state legislature appropriated us an equal amount that we could then sort of fill that. So the feds are going to take that money back. They're taking it actually out of our state level discretionary funds this year, just because that we wanted to also at the same time, we don't want to, by putting state funds into the system, we don't want to create then another issue of having raised the MFS level and then have another issue going on further down the road. So rather than take it out of the formula money that the schools get and then backfill that with state money, they're taking out of our state level activities money and then backfilling that with general revenue, so that we are still able to maintain the same level of technical assistance and supports that we provide from the state level to school districts. So that's happening out of this next year's budget, the 2012 amount. That money will be, the general revenue money will fill back in for that amount that the federal government is going to take back. Nobody on the outside is ever going to notice that that's happening, because there's not going to be any interruption in service. There's no reason to think that anything is going to change for anybody. We're just swapping out a funding source for some state level activities. We have asked, that was 2012. The 2 years that are covered in this current letter, we have a similar process available to us from the legislature, but we have asked the federal government for some guidance on whether we can take all of that money in 1 year. It won't be next year. We've already made that ship has already sailed. That train's already left the station. How many more travel metaphors can I put in place here? We're asking them whether or not we can take all that money out of 1 year or whether we have to spread it across multiple years. And so that's sort of the question we've asked them. We don't have a response from them yet about it as to how they want to do that. It's not anything, like I said, that's burning for right now, because we have next year's federal grant has already been sort of settled as far as that goes. So it won't be coming out of next year's money. So are there any, I mean, that's a very high level, very fast explanation of a super complex issue, but if there's questions or any conversation, I'd love to hear it.
Aaron has a question. I'm going to invite him to the podium.
Hey, Justin, it's
Aaron.
Aaron. So I saw in the letter there was some potentially disagreement between the state and Department of Education about the funding model. Is the difference in from an old model to a new model what caused the shortfall in the first place? Because we just went ahead with a new model that then the Department of Education disagreed with and said, well, we're going to use the old model, and that should have said this amount of money rather than money you calculated.
So the issue really is with, I mentioned that schools receive funding based on where kids are placed. And so Texas's argument was that we continue to follow that model. Districts told us where kids were, and we paid them as much money as we would have in any other scenario. And so then from that perspective, we didn't reduce any funding. It just, the model itself didn't generate as much funding as it did the previous year for schools. By the information schools provide to us, that's run through a formula and generates an amount that goes out. And so the contention of the state was, and I'm not the attorney that argued any of that, so I'm going to get this probably not exactly correct, but so the argument was that we didn't reduce funding. We funded like we always do, based on what the information the schools gave us. We gave them the money for where they said their kids were based on our state model. And so that was in that, but the judge decided that wasn't acceptable. And so we are on the hook for those funds, because it really, there's a plain language clause there that really, they say it doesn't matter whether you're, if you change your funding model or whatever, if you gave $1 million this year, you can't give $999,999 next year. Like, you have to give that up the same amount or more from the state's coffers. And so that's what it boiled down to. And so because our funding model, it wasn't that we reduced funding or we did anything at the state level that would have taken money away from schools. It's just the model that we have generated fewer dollars than it did the previous year. And so that's where that mess is. So as the legislature is pondering what to do about funding, they're going to have to build in something that makes sure that doesn't happen with whatever model that they choose.
Okay, so it's not so much that the funding wasn't there, it was the allocation based on a formula that's been all along.
Yeah. And so as the population of the state grows, for instance, and as districts, we encourage districts to move kids into least restrictive environment, right? That's part of IDEA. That's just good practice. We know kids do better there. And sometimes when districts are successful in moving kids from a more restrictive placement to a less restrictive placement, that may have had an impact on funding of where they coded that kid. Now that kid may be generating less funds based on where he is. And so that's part of the mix too. It's very complex, but there's all little scenarios like that happen over time. And also just the population of the state is changing so rapidly. We're getting such an influx of kids that they all are going to be in different places too. So it's less sort of predictable from year to year as to how that's going to fall and shake out where kids are going to be placed, where our committees are going to place kids.
Let me make sure I've got that correct. So as we're finding the least restrictive environment, which may not be a physical special education environment, that the formula basically generates less allocation.
But potentially, depending on where the kid came from. Yeah, but potentially. In the 86th legislative session, as sort of just trying to do something to make things better, they, in recognizing that we're encouraging, and everyone is encouraging, it's because it's the right thing to do, kids to be placed in with their non-disabled peers more of the time. They actually changed the way they fund just the mainstream weight. They gave that a bump because it's expensive to do that well. Like if you're talking about co-teach models and things like that, it's not, it's expensive. And so trying to address that was something they heard from stakeholders for sure that was a need, and they did. So they did address that in the last session to some degree by increasing that funding a little bit, because we certainly don't want to create a scenario in which we encourage the funding model encourages people to make decisions to move kids into more restrictive placements. We certainly don't want that. And so the legislature, sort of acknowledging that, put a little bump to the mainstream weight, which was helpful for sure. We're grateful for that. But the system as a whole, they really are looking at sometime in the next couple of sessions, probably giving it a pretty good overhaul. That's the conversations that are happening anyway.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Sure.
Justin, this is Joanne. So in the fact that the state is going to supplement what's taken away, is there any concern on your part that there may not be funding to do that if this continues before this is revamped?
I mean, that's always my concern. We're not going to have enough money to do the things that we need to do, because I mean, you just never know. But the legislature has made this a priority in their conversations, and understanding that the last thing that they want to do is have an impact to schools' ability to serve kids with disabilities. And so it's been really clear from the legislators that we've talked to, and from the bills that have passed in the budget, putting sort of that stopgap in place to make sure that there wasn't a backfall, that it's a priority for them. And so that's that's the best that we can hope for, is that it's a priority and that they're acting on it. So, and they are. So it's always a fear that sometimes we're going to run out of money. I mean, from the federal government or from the state government, you never know. It's always that sort of thing. But we're fortunate that our state prioritizes the needs of these kids for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just as a parent, my child's already a young adult, and on his way out, he'll eventually age out of the transition program, given his age. But I mean, if you can share with us down the road, not necessarily today, but who has input into these models? I mean, I know it's all formula based, but do we have something? What's the next step to make sure that what drives these models is a success to the student and the students doing well? I mean, I know it's based on disability, and it's just kind of a scoring process, but we want to make sure that moving from restrictive to least restrictive, that is for the benefit and the child succeeding. So is that, do you foresee any of that kind of input as they revamp this whole process?
So I just dropped a really, really long chat link into chat. I don't know why it came out so long, but that's the page on the TEA website that talks about the Special Education Commission. And they will be accepting public comment, not at this next meeting. I think we're planning for that later in the summer. So there's absolutely an opportunity to give input at that point. And I don't see why this group couldn't decide that they wanted to submit a letter to the commission or something like that from this group. That would absolutely be your prerogative if you chose to do that. And giving your input for that, because they are talking to lots of different folks and looking at lots of different options. And so one of the things that I know they're considering pretty seriously is moving to some sort of model that bases on intensity of need. So looking at, for instance, one issue that is continuously pointed out by stakeholders with the current model is that you receive a certain amount of funding for a self-contained classroom. If a kiddo is in a self-contained classroom, you get X number of dollars for that kid. So in that classroom, and many of us who have been in those classrooms have seen, you can have a kiddo who really needs nothing more than the attention of that classroom teacher and can work pretty independently, does a lot of things on their own. And then you have another kiddo in that same classroom who might have a full-time paraprofessional, might have a nurse that has to be there with them, and then also has occupational therapy and physical therapy that happens a couple times a week for that kid. And both of those kids draw down the same amount of funding. And so even though one requires significantly fewer resources to meet their needs than the other one does. And so I think one of the things that the commission is definitely interested in hearing are how can we address that sort of issue? How can you fund based on the services that a kiddo needs? And at the same time, like, be really wary of making sure that we're not incentivizing any behavior that we don't want to see. Not that our committees would do that, but you just never know. When money's in the mix, you just never know what's going to happen. So we always want to make sure that the system itself has as many safeguards for that as possible. But to your point, Joanne, they are definitely looking for input from the field and from stakeholders. And so I gave you this link just so that you can sort of keep up with where things are when they're happening. The agenda, I think, for this next meeting is already posted there. And as soon as we have the dates settled for the subsequent meetings, they'll be posted on that website as well.
Thank you.
Are there further questions for Justin?
Justin, I have a quick question. This is Agatha. In reading the letter, it talked about, and you may have covered this, the TEA being able to file for a hearing. Are you guys pursuing that?
Not to my knowledge. That doesn't mean that it won't happen, but not to my knowledge, because it's kind of a done deal. Like, they've already, I mean, the litigation didn't go our direction, and so I'm not sure what we would say in a hearing. Doesn't mean that other folks in the agency who will make that decision won't determine to do that. But I haven't heard of any plans to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing I wanted to update the group on today was just our ongoing work with OSEP at the Department of Ed related to our status of noncompliance. We, as y'all will remember, in October, they placed special conditions on this year's IDEA-B grant, requiring us to submit, requiring us to comply with a bi-monthly data submission. And so we've done 3 of those now. We have to, on the 15th of April was our latest one. We have to submit to them any information, updates to how we've communicated with the field and stakeholders about the changes in the dyslexia handbook and how we're rolling that out. And then also, in addition to that, a tremendous amount of detailed reporting related to dyslexia monitoring and the closing out of corrective action plans around dyslexia. And so we submitted to them several hundred, if not thousands, of documents on the 15th of April. We did it again in February, and the first one was in December. We have another one. Our final one actually is due in June. And so I don't know, we'll see at that point what other questions they have for us related to our corrective action. We've completed everything that OSEP has asked us to do. We've completed everything that we agreed to do at the onset in 2018. And so we just continue to provide them with data and documentation as they request it. So there's not much of an update, just to keep that on the radar that everyone knows it's still happening. Still a big part of my life. So, but it's, we've done everything they've asked us to do and provided them with a tremendous amount of data and documentation. So hopefully sometime soon we'll have some good news from that, but we just don't know. So.
Are there further questions for Justin? Agatha, you got something?
Yeah, sorry, I was clicking between. I'm sorry, can you, and it might be in the link, just tell me what the name of the committee that was formed
It's
is?
let me make sure I get it right. What the website says, Texas Commission on Special Education Funding.
Okay.
So that, yeah, there's 3 members of the House and 3 members of the Senate that were appointed by their respective chambers. And then the governor appointed the chair, and she is not a legislator. She is a parent from Conroe area.
Wonderful. I'm just going to put that in the notes. Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Justin.
Hey, Justin, this is Shamika real quick. I do have a question, and I guess I'll have them put it on the agenda for the July 13th meeting. It's not about this, but it kind of relates to funding, as you talked about wanting students in more of an inclusive setting and staffing with that and all of that. It doesn't necessarily relate to this letter, but when you said that about just the funding difference, inclusion versus self-contained and things like that, and students being in more of an inclusive setting, I have some major staffing concerns.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's something I could ask now, or I have to wait till the next meeting. So
It's up to y'all. It's up to the chair.
Shamika, go ahead and ask the questions.
okay, so this is my question, Justin. I'm all over the state and what I see. As more and more districts and more parents are asking for students to be kept in the LRE, which is the general ed classroom. And we all know the staffing issues that are going around. We know some districts use special ed teachers and they have the co-teach model, and they have the inclusion, the in-class support model. And those sometimes are done by special ed teachers, but then we use a lot of paraprofessionals. Is there anything, being that is the push for a lot of parents, that can be done for those paraprofessionals to get more training, or have to do anything to renew their instructional aid certification, being that they are working more and more with students with disabilities in the general ed setting?
So that is a really good question for our folks in educator support. And so I think maybe we can work to get someone from that team to come talk to y'all specifically about certification and requirements around that. That lives outside of us.
Okay, I just know once someone is hired as a paraprofessional based on their college hours, they get instructional aid 1, 2, or 3. They don't have to do any continuing ed like all of us that have administrator and counselor and principal and teacher. And I just think with this push of inclusion and more parents wanting their kids to stay in the LRE, individuals, if they're not a certified special ed teachers, those paraprofessionals need additional training.
Mm-hmm.
So you said the word inclusion, so I went there. So
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. So is there someone from that committee that could come to another meeting and speak to us on that?
We can get someone to come for sure.
I think that should be a priority for our July 13th meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Keith, Justin, let's make sure that we have someone that can speak to this on July 13th.
We can certainly ask.
I appreciate it.
There is one more TEA update that I would like to announce.
Please.
Stephanie Koch is here today. Y'all have not yet had the pleasure of meeting Stephanie, but Stephanie is going to be taking over my role on the CAC as liaison. So,
Okay.
So going forward, Stephanie will be your contact person at TEA. I've very much enjoyed working with you all, but my job duties have kind of changed a little bit. And so I'll still be here to support Stephanie, and I may step in every now and then to say hi, but Stephanie is going to be your liaison. So just want to give Stephanie a chance to introduce yourself.
Excellent. Keith, thank you for your hard work and your dedication to this committee. I will certainly feel free to pester you with ridiculous kid stories and golf scores and other matters of that nature.
Please do.
Stephanie, welcome to the Continuing Advisory Committee for Special Education. We promise that we are a well-behaved bunch most of the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I know I've got some really big shoes to fill with following Keith. So I promise you I will do my absolute best. Just a little bit about me. I've been with TEA for 4 years, and I started out on Keith's team, on the complaints team, and was there for a few years before I transitioned to my current role, which is external engagement and ESC support manager. So as he said, things are kind of shifting around a little bit. And so now I'm stepping into that role. And I watched the minutes from your last meeting just to get a feel for who you guys are and what you do. And I was super impressed, and I'm very excited to join you guys. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Stephanie, I'd love to take some time after this meeting for you and I to kind of chat one-on-one and get to know each other a little bit better, because we're going to get to know each other pretty dang well.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Are there further updates from TEA?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay, I understand that we have at least one person who has signed up for public comment. Keith, can you confirm that?
I have not received any kind of email.
I received in the chat that Steve Aleman is interested in addressing the committee.
Okay.
Is there anyone else, Agatha, who has, or is Steve?
Stephen is the only one that I've seen, but yes.
Okay,
Are you ready for me now?
yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We would be delighted to have you. As you know, where'd it go?
I will be brief. Again,
Okay.
just for the record, my name is Stephen Aleman. I am with Disability Rights Texas. And first of all, I want to just ensure that at the last meeting, I actually made public comment as well. And there was a submission I made to the TEA email address for the CAC. We learned at the meeting that that email address was not functional. So I forwarded that material after your meeting to Keith, who's, again, thank you for your service to this committee. And I was hopeful that that material eventually made it to you. There were two attachments to that email. One concerned a statement by different advocacy organizations about protecting the safety of students with disabilities in our public schools. That was the subject matter of that email. Sad to report that there have been additional stories in the press across Texas since our last meeting, that unfortunately there are still circumstances where students with disabilities are being harmed by school staff. And I am hopeful that your upcoming legislative report will support and call on the legislature to address these instances of abuse, for instance, by expanding the protections of what we refer to as the cameras in the classroom law, so that there is video surveillance available to serve as a deterrence to these incidents, as well as to provide documentation. We believe that it serves both teachers, school staff, parents, and students to have visual confirmation of what has and has not occurred in our Texas public schools when it comes to students with disabilities. So we hope to champion reform and improvements to what we call the cameras in the classroom law. And we suggest that this body in its legislative report include that and other, along with the other suggestions for reform. I'll just piggyback finally on the comments by Dr. Porter, in that in addition, we hope that your legislative report will include recommendations with regard to improvements to our funding of our state special education system. Members of your committee in the past have served on a prior advisory committee on this topic. I want to again thank Agatha for her service on that previous group. That is a building block to this year's work, continued work on that topic. And again, we are hopeful that your report will echo many of those same reform themes, and that you also contribute to that process, both individually and collectively as a group. As Dr. Porter mentioned, there will presumably be a public comment period before this Special Education Funding Commission later this year. Their next meeting is actually this coming Monday at the Texas State Capitol. It is an invitation only witness list. But again, at some point they will be taking public comment. So that concludes my remarks about continued attention to the safety of students with disabilities in our schools, and hopefully my material eventually made it to you. And secondly, the follow up on the Special Education Funding Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. It is always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Stephen, yes, I forwarded that information to the CAC along with other stuff, other documentation right after the meeting last week or last time.
I think at this time, it would be prudent to call a 5-minute break before we begin our work on the legislative report. We will reconvene in 5 minutes. Good morning, friends. Keith, you are a scholar and a gentleman. I am so delighted with you today.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Well, friends, we're to the fun of our agenda, and certainly the thing that I have been looking forward to. Let's start a report. This will be this is our legacy. This is our enduring work. This is what we have been appointed for. And it is with great honor that we get to serve the students in special education and for the state of Texas. If I am hearing conversations correctly, I think that it would be prudent for us to go ahead and list out a few items that we have already discussed that we feel like need to be updated. And certainly some items that we have heard from our parents throughout the state that are still of concern. Would I be out of line to suggest that special education funding needs to be part of our whiteboard discussion? Oh, good feedback. Y'all are awesome.
I pulled up the summary from last time so we can see what topics we used last year as well.
You are a genius woman.
So last year, we talked about we had evaluations as a topic. We also had cultural competence, safety plans, data privacy, staff qualifications. We had educator certification and preparation curriculum. We had transition, which included self-determination and advocacy skills, integration with community partners. And then we had graduation requirements, person-centered planning, and COVID-19. And we also had mental health, impartial hearing officers, and that was it on my categories.
Okay.
Is there any of those that people would like us to revisit? And I can repeat some if that was too fast for some of y'all.
I think Shamika brought up a really good point. As far as the staff qualifications that she brought up earlier, I think we definitely need to revisit that.
From our last meeting minutes, we also had COVID-19 response and behavioral response in schools, addressing mental wellness of staff and students.
Also, I think I'm a little concerned, you know, the residue post-pandemic, going back to what Justin said, that things are shifting within the state. I think we all have heard that kids are not as successful as they were before pre-pandemic. So I guess my question would be, how are these educators making the distinction, is this someone that's kind of on the spectrum that we need to test further, or is this a sped kid, or is this just someone, you know, that isn't as successful just because of the whole pandemic? I mean, is that going to be considered by the legislature when they revamp this whole funding thing?
That's a good point.
Or are kids going to have to be identified as having a mental health struggle when the entire world is struggling? So, I mean, being identified is going to be more interesting.
Another area for us that's kind of on the teacher qualifications is just the overabundance of staff shortages. I know it's across the board, but really in special education, like there's just not BI teachers, there's just not LSSPs. And so, we've always kind of had shortages in some of these areas, but it seems like we could kind of scrape them up and find them, but we literally don't have people even entering our certification programs or our even tracks of people on the way. So I know there's some statewide work on just overall different tracks to get teachers in. So it'd be really nice to have some efforts and focus on reimbursement models or incentives for going into these special education positions.
April, I was going to bring up the same item as well.
Well, that's a pretty interesting list right off the bat. Aaron, did you have something?
I did.
Okay.
Don't trip over the foot here. So I don't know if this falls under the educator preparation for curriculum category, if it needs its own category. But one related, obviously the pandemic, everything went digital. We'll go back, as we're finding out right now, nothing will probably ever go back to fully thing. Digital was and will continue to be a huge part of the classroom experience. Teachers aren't there's a wide variety of experience and comfort level with digital technology to begin with among teachers. I can tell you with my kids, the teachers were all over the place in terms of what they were comfortable with doing and how on top of it they were. Then you add in, how do you make that content accessible or make sure it's accessible for the students there? And if you're in a mainstream classroom, that's the teachers. Maybe there's some special education assistants that could help that with the paraprofessionals. So I'd like to see something on to help with that digital literacy gap with any of the staff, but specifically overlaid with the literacy part being on the accessibility, so that what the teachers are putting together for their students is not creating a barrier, because now we're in a digital world and they didn't know what an accessible PDF document was. They just thought they would just do a scan from a textbook and just send it out, and it doesn't work for a screen reader user or other AT user.
Obviously, we're still hearing reports of our special education students not getting the resources and materials. I think that is certainly something that we need to keep at the forefront, because as much as I would love to say that congratulations, the pandemic's over, no, we're going to be living with this stuff for a while. And the ripple effect of this is going to be unbelievable. Agatha, did I see you got a question, comment, concern?
I was trying to make your box bigger so that I could read the whiteboard so I can accurately get this. So maybe while I have you, you could just read it off to me.
I can read it off to you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Teresa, I'm delighted to see your face. I guess a question. that
I think transition planning needs to be up there because transition planning to what changes if you can't send young adults out to jobs because of the pandemic.
Yep. Yeah.
And maybe the digital gap in rural areas can go under staff digital literacy because it's not just literacy that's the problem. If you don't have connectivity.
Does anybody remember what the data was? Is it like, Shamika, was that more like the data, the checking for understanding? I mean, that's a broad term. Does anybody remember what that was? Or Amy?
The data for which question?
You listed off data as being something that we discussed last time, but do you remember as it relates to what?
We talked to the idea that the privacy surrounding what's contained in your ARD document or other school documents.
Okay.
So that your diagnosis wouldn't be widely shared and identifiable.
Okay, got it.
Agatha, do you need me to read anything off for you?
That would be helpful. Oh, well, I have funding, I have staff qualifications, and under that, staff shortages.
Yep.
COVID-19 response.
Yep.
Behavior response. Transition planning, and mental wellness.
We've also staff shortage.
As its own I'm sorry, would that be as its own category?
Yeah.
Or under staff qualifications?
Well,
or two separate issues.
I have two separate. But that certainly can be the will of the body.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being its own thing, because I do think that that staff qualifications, this will be the third time it enters into a report, and it's getting more and more, and staff shortages, I think it should personally should be its own category.
I would agree.
Especially when we're getting reports that the only qualification to be a substitute teacher in some areas because they're so lacking in staff is having a high school diploma.
Yeah.
And that could be a student that needs to receive special ed services. So
yeah,
I will say this. I mean, I hear both sides. I hear how qualified a person needs to be in order to be in our classrooms. And I don't disagree with that. Don't get me wrong. Yet I also think that sometimes in a previous report, there was a lot of suggestion of needing to up the ante of people even just coming in as a para, which I think also closes the door on a lot of people that, you know, that would like to come in and help fill gaps and help, but don't have necessarily all of the certifications or a background that they need to have. And I think that sometimes things can equal each other out, and I don't know where that balance is. But, you know, being a special needs mom myself, I mean, I'm not saying, oh, because I have a child, I know everything about, autism because my son has autism. Although, I mean, there are things that do go over the entire landscape that our children do share in common. And I would hate to be barred from going in and filling in a gap and filling a need and having a passion to help, and not being seen as qualified enough. And then you have some people that are very qualified, but they've lost the interest and enjoyment of what they do. And I think sometimes that can lead to some of these more aggressive responses that are happening in classrooms, and people just being, their nerves are frayed and things like that. So I don't know what the exact answer is, but I think there is a discussion to be had and a balance that needs to be talked about.
Okay, Agatha, I'm back. I'm sorry, y'all. I had to take a phone call. This is Shamika. Okay, I am very serious on this. Being what I do for a living and what I see, there are too many educational aides in our classrooms right now who are doing more harm than good. I am currently about to go into mediation behind services delivered behind an aide when people are not trained. I mean, I think I understand where school districts are and the staffing issues, and they want bodies there. I don't want check collectors working with students with disabilities. They need to be trained. I don't care if they are passionate, they need a level of training. They are not delivering correctly the services outlined in the IEP, which is putting these school districts in jeopardy. That is a legal contract between the parent and the school district, and services are not being delivered because there are people in the classroom who are not correctly trained. And there's nothing about passion to do with it. They need training on classroom management, behavior, all of that, and they do not have it, and it's causing a lot of problems.
I hear exactly what you're saying, Shamika, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be trained at all. No, absolutely. Anyone that's in there needs to be trained. I'm just previous discussion, and maybe I'm bringing in something that is obsolete because it happened in our last legislative report, saying that just upping the bar of, a para needing to have a certain level. Now, the training that comes in needs to be there regardless. It needs to be there across the board. And I think that it needs to be continuous because our classrooms are always changing. But just, not setting the bar too high for someone to just come in. I mean, if someone needs to have, a bachelor's degree just to be a para, I think some of that can be trained if they're the right person to begin with.
Well,
if that makes sense.
It does. Andrew F., which is a Supreme Court case, says that students with disabilities should have ambitious and challenging IEPs. Well, and that's high expectations. So we need to have high expectations of the staff that is teaching our students. I am not going to waver from this. I've stood on this from the day that I've been on this committee, because I go to too many ARD meetings in this state where I see services are not being implemented correctly because they're in-class support, inclusion, and if it's not a certified special ed teacher doing it, and many districts can't afford for every inclusion personnel to be a certified teacher, so they have to use paraprofessionals. Services are not being implemented correctly.
I'd like to interject here myself. There are a lot of school districts too. I agree that they need training. We're doing sub training for all of our substitutes that come in. They have to go through our training program first. For all of our paras, we provide ongoing training, both fall, spring, during the year. There's a lot of districts out there, and we're really working hard to make sure that our paraprofessionals and our substitutes are trained so that they know which classrooms to work with. With our shortages and knowing how to work with our students that receive special ed services. With our shortages, what we did was we pulled certified staff in to cover for them and put our substitutes in our general ed classrooms to make sure that our special education students that had the highest needs were getting the most support from a certified person. So I just want to jump in and say, I do realize that there may be pockets across the state where things aren't happening. I'm not going to say my district is perfect, but I do want to put a little shout out to our districts that are really striving, working really hard to make sure that all of our staff is trained, including our substitutes. I mean, we have a training program if you want to substitute in our district.
Well, Barbie, I appreciate that. But it goes back to the state level. There is no continuing education requirements to keep an instructional aid certification. They don't, once they get it, they have it. They have to do nothing. So that's where it starts.
I understand. I just wanted to throw that out there for some of our districts that are really working hard to make sure that we have training and that we're spreading the word for training. I know our service center provides training for our paraprofessionals. It's ongoing as well.
I think that maybe there's a few things that are kind of getting muddled together is you're looking at teacher qualification. So the education to be able to get a job, or, you know, the what's required to get a job as an educator or a paraprofessional versus what you're asking them to do. I think perhaps what's happening a lot is we are asking paraprofessionals to work outside and to do things outside of their job qualifications. Implementing programs and designing them, you know, are two very different things, you know, and then the ongoing training that they continue to receive, you know, so I think training, level of education, and then are they working within the scope of their job are kind of maybe three different categories that are leading to this problem.
Okay. We've got a couple of hands raised. I'm going to recognize Dr. Estrada and then Amy Litzinger and then Aaron. Dr. Estrada.
Thank you. I was just going to kind of, I think, echo some of the points that were, I think, said since then, but I think it's the piece of trying to find the balance of getting in, like I said, the paraprofessionals and like I think Shamika is saying, the ongoing requirements of those things. All of that, though, has a component of one, like at the state level, there has to be a requirement for that. But on the flip side of that, in order for districts to do that, they're going to have to be able to pay those paraprofessionals more. So I don't know what, you know, recommendation comes with that, but I know that y'all experience it too, but here when the Buc-ee's comes in town, we lose all of our paraprofessionals and our bus drivers because they're getting paid so much more. So if we are going to make a recommendation on continuing PD, which we need to, if you're in a behavior class, you need behavior training. At the service center here at Region 10, we're in the process of developing some extensive paraprofessional on-demand training because we realize it's hard to get people out of the classroom for the training. So it's a lot of on-demand training, but if there's not a, you know, there's not a requirement for that, but obviously most people in those classrooms want the skills that they need to work appropriately with the students. But in order to keep people of such, you know, a caliber and to continue to go to PD in their off hours or require them to do things in the off hours, there's going to have to be a component of raising those because, you know, across our state, I don't know, the maximum I've been in the district was up to 30,000 for a para, but usually more around the 10 to 12,000 a year that we have paraprofessionals paid at. And they just can't pay their bills with that salary. So it's an answer of, if we have to have staff people, we also have to support that for PD and make sure that there's a model to support that kind of extensive support that they do need very much so to be successful in those classrooms.
Thank you. Amy.
I just wanted to remind everyone that we should mark recommendations that we're suggesting just for the duration of the public health emergency and which ones we think should be permanent recommendations. Because if we are making a short-term plan versus a long-term plan, it needs to be clear. So when we're talking about qualifications, is it qualifications just because we have a dire shortage? Or is it qualifications are lowered to XYZ forever? It needs to be clear in the report, and realize we're just making committees right now, but it may frame how you're thinking, which direction your committee wants to go.
Excellent thought. And I think certainly there's room in the conversation for what starts out in the short term as public health emergency certainly should continue on long term. obviously,
Unless we're lowering standards for the sake of the emergency,
right.
which is what I was trying to say,
Absolutely.
that just because we lower them doesn't mean we have to stay there.
Right. And I think at this point, where we are in a public health crisis, and this is me editorializing, please take that not as, this is me stepping off my chair podium for just a moment and being a mom in education. There are some standards that have been lowered that should never have been lowered. And we need to get them back up quick, fast, and in a hurry, because our world is changing and isn't going back to the way things used to be. And I think that
Right.
the report needs to reflect that. Aaron, you had a comment.
I was, great discussion. I think there's a lot of, in our future, lively debate and discussion about these two areas. I was going to suggest maybe that staffing and staff qualifications are distinct, but they're probably so interrelated that we want to make sure that as we further go through the process, to make sure that they're paired up together, even if ultimately we have separate recommendations under each category, just make sure that they're completely in sync and rationalized as much as possible. So I'm not sure procedurally if we're getting into diving into specific recommendations and making that sausage, as you said today, if that's happening this morning or even today, or if that's later, maybe we want to note who would be really interested in further exploring those two topics, and maybe we can move on, kind of making sure if we've got all of our bases covered here.
Sure. I know that has been done in the past, and Agatha, now would be a fine time as the institutional knowledge and secretary to remind me. At this point in our process, we're simply whiteboarding topic ideas and seeing who would be interested in serving on which subcommittees that would dive in deeper for specific recommendations. That sound about right, Agatha?
Yes, that's what we did last time. So, and one thing flows into another. I think the last time we whiteboarded actually was we were in person. And so we did split off into our subcommittees, and the individual subcommittees started delving into it. But I think this is the first real open discussion that we've had. And I think it'll be hugely beneficial to have it and get some ideas out there and where people's heads are. So I don't think we can go wrong right now. As long as by the end we got something concrete.
By December 31st. One topic that was raised in earlier conversation, I'm going to reintroduce it for discussion at this point. Is any further concern that the committee wishes to address on cameras in classroom? Or can we fit that topic into one of the ones that we currently have here? Is that a staff qualification issue? Or does that need to be its own separate topic?
I'm sorry, Jen, that's its own separate topic. The issue is parents are not aware of that law has been passed. I inform many of my clients when there are issues that you can request a camera in the classroom. Another issue is how long it takes. Of course, they have to inform all of the other parents that there's going to be a camera installed, but then finding a vendor, getting it done, it could take 2 to 3 months once that request is made for that camera to be put in that classroom. That's a problem. It's taking too long.
Okay.
I have the cameras in classrooms in my notes under behavior response. I don't know how many other things we want to put under behavior response. And I'm not sure. I know that from what Shamika is saying that it's something that parents can request, and I don't know if it would be something that we would want to recommend that maybe we push for it to be more of a standard practice, that's just how our special education classrooms are. I'm not really sure what the solution is but just something to put out there.
Okay.
Hey, Agatha, real quick on that. The way the law reads and IDEA reads is districts can put they do not have to have specialized, you call them specialized units. They do not have to have that same, every unit they offer on a campus, like at the high school level or middle school. So having cameras installed in every classroom, mandatory, may be hard to push because districts move specialized units around every summer. So from campus to campus. So, I mean, so you could have a classroom that has a unit camera that's not being used, then a unit gets moved to another campus to the classroom and there's no camera, then we have to get it installed. I mean, I would like it to be mandatory, but that's one thing IDEA gives districts is the right to where they put those specialized units.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I
So-
knew just by saying that there's not an easy.
I would
you know,
love
but
for that to
me, it's just
happen.
kind of like, why don't we just safeguard the students, safeguard the teachers, safeguard the aides, and just have full accountability, and I get all the parameters it goes into, but
And the one thing one thing I like the cameras, the one thing I don't like, there's no audio. So there's a limit on even what you get. There's no audio on the footage that you see.
Dr. Estrada, you have your hand raised. Do you have something for us?
Oh, that might have been left over from the last one.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. All right. Not a bad list, ladies and gentlemen, for 20 minutes of spitballing. We're pretty awesome that way.
real quick. Okay, so in the notes here, I have cameras in the classroom under behavior response.
Yeah.
Just expanding on that, do we have anything else that we would want to have fall under behavior response? I know cameras in the classroom it was one specific topic, but then, there's the restraint and seclusion. So again, it's one of those, one melds into the other, but do we want that to be a separate thing? Because from a lot of the parents that I talk to, especially as they get into the higher grades, that definitely becomes an issue. And I've heard a few horror stories of how I've just heard some horror stories.
Sure. What was the last comment? Because I was listening and thinking all at the same time. So we have cameras in the classroom. What was the other part?
The restraint and seclusion.
Yeah, that's two separate topics.
Yeah, I've got them listed as two.
Okay. So but it would be two separate topics under like behavior response, or just its own thing?
Those are just two separate topics.
Okay. So do we even want to list behavior response, or do we just want the topics to be cameras in the classrooms, restraint and seclusion?
I mean, we can look back. I have some contacts in Missouri. They just passed a lot of restraint and seclusion laws in the state of Missouri this last legislative sessions on no restraints and seclusion. So I have a bunch of advocate friends there, and they do a lot of work on their legislative, and they just had some major wins in the area of restraint and seclusion.
Okay.
Okay. I'll just leave it as its own, each individual.
Okay.
I think as we're talking about restraint and seclusion, I don't know what the former conversations were, but just from the ESC perspective, and then we have sped techs here, we get a lot of parent and educator calls about there's still a lot of confusion around the prior legislation. It took a while and is still unclear on some of those pieces. And so that's a conversation that's a very hot topic still today on just understanding what was intended by that legislation. And then, as we move into the conversation of, how do we best keep our students and teachers safe? Because we definitely get lots of regular reports on injuries on both sides
Yep.
across the state.
Yep. Well, friends, I think it would be prudent to take, and hear me out on this one. I propose a 10-minute break, and here's why. I'd like to take some time to put on paper instead of whiteboard these topics, and then come back and start delving topic by topic into what sub asks we want to put, you know, case in point, we have funding. Is there anything specific we want to have in funding, and start assigning our subcommittees and who's interested in talking about and taking on what topic. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to get that organized. So now would be an excellent time to take a break.
Jen,
Yeah.
will there be a lunch break, or do you know the estimated timeline?
I know that we're scheduled to go till 2. I don't anticipate this meeting lasting until 2 p.m. with no lunch break. I do not have a schedule at this time, but if you've got a meeting to do, Susan, by all means, you go do you. We've got quorum. We're going to be okay.
Okay, thank you.
Bet. Again, Keith Swink, you are an officer and a scholar. I appreciate you. Shall we talk about some funding issues? Because that was what I had at the top of the list. Other than we need more money. Small joke. Is there any, thank you, Barbie. I appreciate you. I knew I could count on you. I could make a robbing Peter to pay Paul joke, but that one might not go as well.
Well, I'd like to speak on the subject. Now, everyone keep in mind that I am a parent, but I do work in the finance world, that's as a full-time working mom. And I guess what has always bothered me and bothers me even more is to hear the report from Mr. Porter this morning. I've always felt that there needs to be a check and balance. My goodness, if they're taking $33 million away from our state, the system is broken. The process is broken. And these are our kids. You know, my kid's 20 years old. He didn't get the best education that I wanted him to get as a taxpayer. So I'd like to start there. I mean, if they're going to revamp the whole process, then we need to be in the front line here and have some input. You know, we're leaving it to the districts to code our kids, and all of that ties back to how much our kid gets to receive, you know, their education. So, you know, I think I'd like to somehow incorporate it in that angle. I'm not an educator, you know, I don't understand the whole budgeting thing. I mean, I'm a finance major, but I don't understand the education budgeting system. So I'd like for that to maybe be a topic at some future point. But, you know, I think, you know, if we're allowing our public school systems to be in charge of coding, then they're in charge of how much money is coming into their district. And it all goes back to what we talked about in the certifications of the teachers, because when my kid was younger, I always got the excuse that there's no money. We have no money to add another person for support. There's no money. That was always what I heard when my kid was younger. So if they're revamping this, let's get in front of them. And I don't know how to, but I think I'd like to put that at the forefront.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Amy, I see your hand is raised.
Kind of following off of what Joanne just said, I think we definitely need to address that your setting should not determine your amount of funding, and it shouldn't be weighted so that more restrictive environments get more money. Because whether we say that we love restrictive environments or not, if you get more money for more restriction, you're going to end up with more people in more restrictive environments.
I actually think they did an adjustment on that to where the least restrictive environments are getting more funding.
If that's true, then I hadn't heard that. And we should recommend that it stays that way.
Yes, and I just phoned a friend and she texted me back and said, yes, that's correct. So more funding goes to your the kids that are in the LRE. So the way that they weighted it, and the Texas Commission on Special Ed Funding, they have a website. I mean, you can go to TEA and pull it up. Dr. Porter put the link in there, and that it can give you more information. You can go back and listen to their live stream or their recorded meetings. And they do have one.
I'm glad they fixed it.
And they have one coming up on April 25th.
I think to Dr. Porter's point before about, and I think what we're saying now is that if the recommendation is going to be about not whether or not the placement, because we all know the placement starts, is about the services and the amount of staff and people and specialties that the student needs, that those things be taken into account regardless of
and resources rather than placement.
So this is Agatha speaking. This is just a question. So am I reading into Amy and Joanne, you're looking to be on the funding subcommittee?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I can do that as well.
Okay, I'll put your names down and you know, just so we can kind of start shuffling people where they want to be.
Are there any other committee members on the whole that wish to be a part of the funding subcommittee? Ivana?
Sorry, Jen, who was the last one?
Dion? Deanna.
Deanna.
I'm going to get this right. I apologize.
Okay, I'm going to get the correct spellings of everybody's name, the new members at the end. So
yeah.
So.
And Agatha, now would be a fine time to remind me, but I seem to recall even during the pandemic in 2020, when we were putting together our legislative report, we encouraged our subcommittee members to communicate via email, not so as to violate open meetings. We do have walk-in quorum, but a 3-member subcommittee will not break or will not be a walk-in quorum for our committee of 17. So be cognizant of that, but certainly do communicate with each other in between our regularly scheduled meetings. We will expect a subcommittee report to the body on the whole as we continue.
Yes, Jen, just to reiterate, yes, that is true. In fact, as long as we don't have 9 members in any one time communicating with each other, so we can have 3, 4, 5 members. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, we have 3, so we can't have any more. just know that you can be in multiple, although it is going to be a requirement, especially with how many meetings that we have as a group, that these subcommittees meet on their own and bring to the larger committee their recommendations, and we can fine tune from there. Amy and I did a lot of work on the last report via Zoom, and Shamika and I on the report before that did a whole lot of communicating between just the two of us. So yeah.
We're gonna get cozy, gang. Aaron.
One other thing on that, which is subcommittees can't take any official action. You can't do anything saying this is what we are going to do as the CAC. Everything you have to do is you have to bring it to one of these meetings, and then we decide whether we do it or not.
That is correct. Subcommittees, please be assured that you are making recommendations. Any and all votes will take place in the larger body in compliance with Open Meetings Act.
Jen, if possible, I'll be on the funding committee as well.
You betcha. And as chair, I'm going to just kind of be the committee member at large, and I would like to request to be copied on conversations as they come up, just so that I can keep a good idea of what all we're doing and when we're doing it, and if there's anything that I can do to be of assistance.
Okay.
And just as a working parent, unfortunately, weekends are going to be my available time. I commute from New Braunfels to downtown San Antonio Monday through Friday, so I don't get home till 7. So I have a small window in the evening, so I hope that's okay with the rest of y'all.
I am sure that all subcommittees can sort those details out. I have great faith in our ability to figure out how to make this work. Is there anything further for the funding subcommittee at this time? Then I leave it in the subcommittee's capable hands, and I'm going to rate. Agatha, what do you need from me? I can move up a little closer.
Sorry, I was scratching my my forehead actually. Let's see. I'll you know what, maybe if you wouldn't mind just taking a picture of that and
text it to you.
That would be, if that's appropriate. If that doesn't complicate anything, if you can, yeah, then I'll just add it in here.
I mean, to me, that's no different than a document being emailed to you.
Okay, fantastic. The next bullet point that I have is staff qualifications as far as the subcommittee goes.
Yep, hang on. I guess first and foremost, do we want to ask for volunteers to serve on this committee? Don't all jump in at once.
Jan, Shamika, you can put me on it.
I was waiting for you, darling.
Well, I've been harping on this for 4 or 5.
I'll serve on it with Shamika.
All righty.
Thank you, Teresa.
You're welcome.
You know, if you guys are having a Zoom meeting, I want in on that one, just, cause.
I'm just gonna say that, you know what, I'll because I was part of the very first time, I'd like to, if you and Shamika, if you and Teresa don't mind, be part of that as well. learn as much as I can.
Come on. You know how I feel about it.
I do.
I think everybody on the committee now knows how I feel about it.
It's
You know,
good though.
What I love about you, Shamika, is we know where we stand with you and we don't have to guess. I approve.
I'm happy to serve there too.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
That was April, but I was about to speak as well.
Come on, Susan.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I was gonna say as a representative from higher education, I would like to serve on this committee.
This is what happens when old women need to
That
get the
would be
eyes
great.
checked before they get on a Zoom call. Okay. Is there anything that we want to whiteboard at this time before the committee starts whiteboarding too?
Real quick,
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Agatha. Real quick, I just wanted to, at one point, Susan was saying she saw that there were 3 issues at hand with the staff qualifications after, kind of reiterating what we had all talked about. And she had said continued training for paraprofessionals and aides, level of education on entry, and there was a 3rd one, and I didn't catch it. I know I'm making you rack your brain.
No, I know what it was. So their expectations, like what they're expected to do in their roles. It's almost job descriptions.
Okay.
And
can you
and-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And my big one is
Para-training?
no requirement of continuing education for their instructional aid certification. So that's a state level thing.
Okay.
Continued train. Okay. Would that fall under continued training?
For me, it would, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it would. I mean, it's like principals and counselors, we have to do so many and things have to be done to keep our certificates, and they don't have to do anything.
Okay. I added in state level, and Shamika, we'll all discuss this much further in depth when we get in our subcommittee. I just wanted to catch those things. Thank you.
Shamika, this is Joanne. As far as you know, are the districts required to attend certain types of continuing ed? Like,
they offer their own, and
well, that's what I don't like.
Principals, diagnosticians, counselors, teachers all have to do so many continuing educations to renew their teaching certifications. It's usually every 6 years. Instructional aides, when you get hired in a district, your instructional aid position, what you get, an aid 1, 2, or 3, depends on how many college hours you have. That's the last thing I read. It could change. But, and then there's a level of what you can do with each of those instructional aid 1, 2, or 3 certificates, but they don't have to do any kind of CEUs, no kind of renewal or anything.
But is there a process that approves what is it, an approved continuing education course?
I mean, there's some things with that, when I was a former teacher administrator, I mean, staff meetings were continuing education, staff development days, trainings, things you do at the region centers, things like that are considered CEUs. Somebody else is a little more recent. I left the classroom I left the districts over 8, 9. I mean, I'm not involved as much, but I think it's the same way. For teachers, if I'm still going to say teachers, 150, administrators, 50, 150, 200. I can't remember what it is for diagnosticians and things like that.
Okay.
So.
And that's something that we might be able to break down more effectively in our recommendation and really show the lack.
Yep. I have great faith in y'all's ability. I look forward to these I look forward to this committee's report. Is there anything else for staff qualification at this time? Aaron's got something.
So for the folks working on staff qualifications, I'll point you to the existing biennial recommendation from the Governor's Committee. There's, under education, there's several related to instruction of deaf and deafblind children in terms of making sure that they're, particularly if the students are ASL users, make sure that and I forget the exact term, but in essence, the people that are supporting them as a deaf instruction have some level of ASL competency. So there's the recommendations and the research that went into that in the biennial report that folks are, and I see Monica here from the Governor's Committee. I'm sure they'd be happy to be a resource on that particular area. It's not my area of specialty, but Randy Turner on the staff is fabulous there. That was something we were working on.
Fantastic. Thank you. Agatha, are you good? Do you need me to take a picture?
Maybe just for good measure, just so we have it.
Yep.
I'll delete it. I think I'm good, but just in case you captured something I didn't.
I don't think I did.
So the next bullet I have on my list is staff shortages. I don't really have anything under it, but we can discuss that and maybe see if we want to go ahead and assign that.
First of all, do I have any committee members who are willing to serve on this subcommittee?
I would like to serve on this one.
Okay.
Just in case there might be ideas that will work between HHSC and TEA.
Sure.
You can put me down too,
Okay.
Jen, because I have some thought as it correlates to funding.
Okay.
My internet went wonky. And what's this subcommittee?
No problem. This is staff shortage.
Okay. Awesome.
Anyone else for this committee? Fantastic. Ladies, I look forward to this. Do we have any suggestions from the body on the whole for the subcommittee to take a look at?
Well, personally, I mean, just a kind of a comment. Personally, I did like Amy's suggestion about, especially with the staff shortages, due to the pandemic and loss of learning aspects of things. I do like how she was talking about breaking things down from a short-term perspective and a long-term perspective. Some things might happen in the short term, such as, and I'm not saying this sticks, but it's certain incentives and things like that to kind of boost things up, as opposed to more long-term solutions. So
okay,
just putting.
Liana has.
I have a thought. Would it be appropriate to collapse the funding and the staff shortages together? Because they do have a lot of things that could be discussed in one and the other. Suggestion instead of a standalone item.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Okay. Then what I heard from the group is we're going to combine staff shortage with staff qualification.
Because the teacher incentive allotment is going to play a lot into this particular situation as well,
Right.
which
So
directly
we're-
impacts funding.
So we're going to roll staff shortage into funding. Okay. Agatha, you got that? Rock on.
I think for that committee too, there's not a need to start from scratch. Like I said, the commissioner has a lot of projects going with just schools in general on some fast tracking of how to get, people certified or an additional certification, they're really looking at some innovative ways, not just in Texas, but at other states that are doing. So I think anything that we can model up under things that commissioners already doing, but saying like, okay, here's a sped track, then that's usually what we've seen, kind of gets a little bit more traction. And then with small and rural, with the grant from TEA, they're doing a lot of reimbursement programs for LSSPs and DIAGs in small and rural. So there's already some good models that we could maybe spread out for other areas.
Fantastic.
April, this is Agatha. It sounds like to me, you're saying you would like to be on this funding committee?
So I make sure everybody has an opportunity to be on a committee before I sign up for two.
You're
Well,
welcome.
I think your input will be very relative.
I'm happy to serve where I'm needed, wherever you need me.
How many are on that committee now? If you put funding and staff shortage together?
Still just the four. I have Joanne, Amy, Deanna, and Barbie.
Okay. Again, my internet's having issues and we're having to problem solve it right now. And I'm like, every once in a while I catch a word and sometimes I catch a whole thing, but occasionally I miss key points. So funding and staff shortage together is only 4. Okay.
Yep. All right. Teresa, did you want to be on that?
No.
Okay.
No, just wanted to make sure we weren't hitting the quota.
Yep. Agatha, I have next in my notes, mental and behavioral health for current and post-pandemic, so short and long term. Is that what you've got, or what have you got next?
I mean, it's just, we can absolutely go there. Mental and behavioral health.
Yep. Who's interested in serving on this subcommittee?
Real quick, Jen, I don't have any notes under this mental and behavioral health / wellness section. So maybe if we figure out a few things that go under it, it might be easier to.
Then the notes that I had was, this was where we had put specific to behavioral health. We had 2 tracks with this for behavioral health in the classroom, and then mental health for staff and student. Under behavioral health, we had restraint seclusion, we had cameras in classroom. And then for mental health for staff and student, that was looking at the ramifications of the public health crisis and how is that impacting specifically our special education students and what we can do about that. Does that make sense?
I think so, yes. Okay, so yeah, I had it all spread out, but okay, so restraint and seclusion, and then cameras in the classroom, all in that.
Yep.
All together.
Yeah. So again, I ask any committee members willing to serve on this subcommittee.
This is Agatha. I am definitely happy to be a part of this, this subcommittee. I think it's very important, although I don't have enough information to necessarily need it. So I would need some help. I mean, I would love to, definitely have some Shamika's input on this committee, considering she has a lot of the advocacy for the cameras in classrooms and that aspect, but I'm not going to put you on the spot, Shamika.
I mean, with everything I have going on in the summer, I can barely do the one subcommittee. So, I mean, I'm happy that you can email me and ask me stuff, but I just can't do more than one.
Okay.
I understand. Maybe if you can, if you wouldn't mind just kind of preemptively, sending some stuff, that would be great. And then of course, you're always amazing when it comes to answering questions on email.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help with this one too.
I'm sorry, my back was turned. Was that, who was
It's
that?
me, Barbie. I'm happy to help on this one.
All right.
Thanks, Barbie.
I'm putting myself in on that one too.
We can always send something to a subcommittee if we have input. We don't have to.
100%. 100%.
Of course.
You bet.
Yeah, Amy, you don't have to be on the committee, although, I mean, it's, you're gonna end up being part of the whole
Right.
finalized report anyway, so
And
absolutely.
that goes for any member of the committee. You don't have to serve on a particular subcommittee. If you've got information that you think that will help our legislative document, by all means, do not be shy about communicating. I remain convinced that good communication and clearly articulated expectations cure 99% of our world's conflict. And Aaron is over here laughing with me.
I said almost the same thing before.
Comms people, we get the job done. Is there anything else in particular for this particular subcommittee?
So just to clarify, we're calling that one mental health and behavioral health and wellness.
Yeah. Yep. Let me get a picture of this for you, Agatha.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got next in my notes, transition planning for post-pandemic. Agatha, does that sound about right?
Yes, I just don't have it. I mean, I guess that one we can split up into post-pandemic, but one of our last report had transition planning recommendations. So I guess that subcommittee can figure out if they want to continue on with that, and then also put a caveat in there for something specific to COVID, or else
Do we want
there's
to do long and short term?
we could, because we also have another one which is specifically COVID response, or I have it down as COVID response. So, we can formulate it however we want when it comes to the final report.
I would like to be in this subcommittee, please.
I was going to volunteer you even if you hadn't, Miss Amy. Aaron, did I see your hand?
I was going to ask a clarifying question on
Go for it.
transition, which is this, do we mean transition in the special ed sense, or do we mean transition in terms of transitioning from pandemic to endemic?
Transitioning in the from
School to work. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead and put me down.
All right. Anyone else? Nope. I'm going to stay a floater for this particular committee. One, I have a very personal interest with a 16-year-old daughter, but two, I have some time constraints but a lot of opinions.
Okay, so I have Amy, Aaron, and Jen down for transition planning. I don't have any sub category or sub information. If anyone has any suggestions on things that they'd like that committee to look at specifically.
Amy, do you have any ideas off the top of your head?
I would say figuring out, I guess virtual needs to be on there as a subcategory. And lack of traditional entry-level jobs.
And I know Amy earlier, and I don't know exactly how you had stated it, but you were saying something about similar to that lack of entry level, but just the work programs are not working right now as they had been. So,
and a lot of those entry-level jobs need to be more aware of health and safety standards than they used to be, masking, wearing gloves. So a lot of those programs aren't going out into public because those young adults that would be transitioning may be more susceptible to COVID-19 than their peers because of their disabilities. So just something that I've been seeing through my lens as a self-advocate and through TXP2P.
okay. I will say, I know, of course, I know all districts handle things differently, but especially in the last several weeks, I've been seeing several school buses at, the places that I frequent, and they seem to be having the work programs coming back. Our local HEB has been having a bus. I think it's weekly.
Yeah, but then that could also lead to you can't be in our work program unless you're not medically fragile, which creates a whole level of, are you really getting FAVE in a transition program if you're being told that you can't participate? So just things to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm living through that right now with my son who's 20. He's in the second year of the transition program. He'll age out at 22. And there's just not a whole lot, at least in our small, well, we're not small anymore, and New Braunfels is growing by leaps and bounds, but there's not a whole lot that the community has to offer for this specialized group to go to. Right now it's animal shelter, the bowling alley. We've been into the HEB one time, but I don't know, maybe you know, Amy, but I've never really understood if funding comes to the transition program. Do you know, or does anybody know?
That may be a good Justin question for next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1 second.
I believe that there would be funding for OJT and VAC. So there should be some funding if they're enrolled in school.
Okay.
Anything further? Agatha, let me get a picture of this for you.
Just so I can capture that, we were saying we wanted to request information from Justin on transition funding for, what was it, work?
On the job training?
Oh, okay. Transition funding for. Okay, great, thank you.
If y'all just want to email that question to Justin,
Okay.
that would be fine. Or send it to Stephanie and she can send it to Justin.
Last but not least, on my list here is staff digital literacy and accessibility.
And Jen, real quick, I also have COVID-19 response, but I'm not sure if that's kind of being absorbed specifically into the other.
I kind of feel like a lot of our subcommittees have a component to a COVID-19 response already built in as we're talking about short and long term.
Okay.
Does that, to quote my philosophy professor from college, does that make sense to you?
And this new subcommittee is, this one is data.
Staff, digital literacy, and accessibility. Yeah, I'm looking right at you. I know that Aaron is going to be one of, yeah. You were going to get voluntold otherwise. Anyone else?
I would like to be on this one as well, please.
Anyone else? We'll come back to that. A couple of things that were mentioned that I have in my notes relate to specifically connectivity in rural areas, as well as further and better training for staff to ensure digital fluency. I have all right? Come on up.
Sharon, yes, on both of those, and I would add basically when there is development, procurement, things that the teachers don't really have any control over, that they're just getting from school district and so forth. How is that done? And is that, because staff might say, I have to use this, and it's not accessible. That's not, that's out of their control. So how do you get the procurement or the development up front? So what sort of standardized is accessible, and then obviously the training for the teachers so that materials that they're developing and adapting for their classroom also, that they have an awareness and capability to either identify or create accessible content.
Makes sense.
And then
Can I
just
add
this.
a piece as somebody who was given a lot of assistive technology that the teachers were modifying curriculum so that it could be used with it, and they didn't know how it worked. So they would modify things that weren't helpful based on how the technology actually worked, or I would have to get really good at troubleshooting my own technology, because when it broke, the teachers didn't know enough about it to be able to help me when it wasn't working the way that it should be. So I think we might need a piece on training on assistive technology.
Yeah.
But on assistive technology specifically,
Got it.
that should be included in digital literacy, and it's not just something that the whole class is using.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up, Amy, because on top of it, we do have to make sure that our recommendations are for special, that, they're special education specific. So like, I mean, I get the connectivity in rural areas but we need to narrow that down to it being very specific for special education.
Yep.
Right. Or unidentified students, because there's still students that are unidentified that fall under our purview, even though they're not specifically identified yet.
Yep. Is there anything further for this particular subcommittee? Y'all, I am so impressed with you. Agatha, let me get a picture of this for you.
Yes, just in case, just to make sure. And then of course, when we do the notes, the review of the minutes, anything that needs to be added in for public. And just, so I have Erin and Amy in that subcommittee.
Correct.
Okay.
And I am texting you now.
Thank you.
Before this meeting ends, can we update our email list so that the subcommittees can communicate with each other?
I think we should.
Everyone should have everyone's email. I sent out the agenda by email, you should have everyone's.
Okay. Well, then I guess double checking, everyone did receive their agenda? Hand up, yep. Okay. Agatha, you should have just gotten, or should be in the process of receiving several pictures from me.
I haven't received it yet, but I will. And what I can do is, just as a safety measure, I'll take all of the emails off of that email that Keith sent out and just make a quick list. I'll send it out to you, Jen, and you can get it out to everybody.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because like mine, it's not connected to my name, so you wouldn't know my email being connected to me.
Okay.
So
yeah, that was about what I was going to say is, if it's a clear cut, like, so-and-so at this, it's easy to figure out. But if it's numbers and letters, I don't know who that connects to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'll look at it quickly and then maybe.
Sure.
Clarify.
Would it be helpful, Agatha, to take a short recess so that you can update minutes and notes?
Yeah, that would not be bad.
How long do you need, dear?
I mean, you know, I'm actually right now, to tell you the truth, I am pretty up to date with
Well,
with
should,
things.
you want to take 5 minutes and then we check back in with you?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Let's do it. 5-minute break, y'all.
I am good. I have the notes updated as far as the list goes for, sorry, my camera's on it. As far as the list goes of the email addresses, instead of going over that like this, I got some information in the chat. So I'll put all of that together and send it to you, Jen.
Great.
And then we can distribute that out. I don't want to do it on a public forum.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
So I did get everything updated from the notes you sent. I just combined everything. So
Okay.
I'm up to date as far as.
Then as I see it in our agenda, our next agenda item is take possible action on minutes and future meeting topics. I believe it would be prudent for this committee to consider our biggest meeting topic for next time in July, July 13th, is looking forward to subcommittee minutes and reports, and letting that be the bulk of our meeting. I do understand that we will have some updates from Texas Education Agency. I look forward to them, but I think the bulk of our meeting needs to be this report. Unless there is, if something else pressing comes up, by all means, I am an email away. I'm sure that Stephanie and I can make adjustments on the fly to our agenda and would be happy. I'm seeing nods. I am happy to do that. But for the moment, I think that it would be prudent to let this report be the main agenda item.
Jennifer, there will be a roll package that will need to run by you all in July. as well.
Fantastic. Then congratulations. We're doing rule packet and we're doing legislative report. A rule packet. Simply put, we've got some regulations coming through to other parts of through TEA. Yeah.
Do I put that in the, I don't put that in the minutes because that's what TEA is bringing to us.
Correct.
I wrote down, okay, so I wrote down that we'll continue work on the legislative report. We have a request for information from educator support on continued training for instructional aides,
Yes.
and a request for information on transition funding for on-the-job training.
Yes. I would also humbly submit an update from Justin Porter on some of the funding, not just funding, but also OSEP issues. Since, as he told us, we should be finished with our reporting, I'd like to know how that's going.
OSEP?
Yes. Aaron.
I'd like to request staff, I don't know if that's Keith or Stephanie, if there's any update on the Digital Curriculum Advisory Committee. Was something the Governance Committee had requested TEA to do, and I know it happened, but I never kind of got a resolution to that. So
Perfect.
that would feed very much into.
You mean like right here?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I think that would also be prudent.
Okay,
Stephanie?
so a request for update on the digital.
Digital Curriculum Advisory Committee. Including whether there was ever a report issued or findings or data or anything that would help us with our upcoming recommendations.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, so any other,
Anything further, or are we interested in seeing the minutes for update and review? Hearing nothing, I think it's well in order to have Agatha share her screen so that we can take a look at minutes.
I would be happy to do that. Okay, does everyone see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. Okay. So the green highlight is just people that were here. So I'll go back and clean that up. And when we started our meeting at 9:05.
Real quick. Deanna's name is D-I-A-N-A.
D-I-A-N-A. Okay. And did I get the last name correct? Nelson?
Yep.
And then Aaron Bangor?
Yep, all good.
Okay. And I'm not sure if how many members have changed, if the absentees are correct or incorrect.
I didn't see Laura today.
You didn't? I thought I saw her at least for a little bit.
Okay.
I think she was there when we first
started.
mhm.
Okay. Cool.
And then, or all the TEA representatives I have. Because
Yes,
you
that's
and
everyone.
Justin and Stephanie, and then I saw Brittany's name on there for a bit.
Yes.
Okay. Great. And then, okay.
Again, correcting the spelling of Deanna's name to D-I-A-N-A.
Okay, yeah, where is it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like people are down here. So I just can't.
If I'm reading faster, by all means, stop me.
Yeah, if anyone needs me to, I'm just trying not to make people dizzy.
Can you put disability coding of students? Coding of students sounds kind of, I don't know.
Sure.
And maybe because disability coding kind of sounds like AUSI, like instructional arrangements is actually the word where the PEMS funding is generated from. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Okay. Instructional arrangement and just stop with the coding.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. I'm going to scroll down. So the staff qualifications kind of jumped pages. but I think I captured most of what we were talking about, and things will, form up more and more as we go, as we meet as in our subcommittees.
Second.
Hey, Agatha, for the
Yes.
digital literacy one, procurement access and staff training, can you bump that to the left one? It's not a subset of the access.
Oh, the procurement and access is its own thing. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Yep. Connectivity is its own separate thing, and then procurement's its own thing.
Gotcha. Okay. And then staff training is its own thing.
Yeah, and then access, if you just accessibility as instead of access, just
That was my fault.
No, I mean, this is, I have no, sorry. I have no ego in any of this. It's whatever you guys want.
crowdsourcing.
And staff, should I get rid of staff training and have it just be staff literacy of digital media? Or,
Just bump that to the left one, do shift.
okay. And this is just real quick, just for all the new members, and just a reminder for anyone, we do our notes at the end of the meetings because we were only meeting 4 times a year. Sometimes it would take 4 months for our notes to be approved post meeting, and so we do it this way just so that we can get our meeting notes out there for the public, anyone that follows us in that regard. And I just try and maybe I over capture, but I just try and capture as much as possible, as accurately as possible, so that with links and things like that, so people can see and go. So I'm gonna scroll down real quick. We've got transition planning and then the mental health. So make sure I captured that. Oops, sorry.
This is ticky-tack, but well-being should be hyphenated.
I bet that's what the blue lines were about. It's all right. And then I know this time here is not correct. I believe that was. Oh. And the other times of the approved minutes and things like that, I just I use the outline from the meeting before, so that's why there's already time in there.
Come on, I gotta give the Queen Secretary the credit in the note taking.
Oh, this is Shamika's outline. My gosh.
I'm just playing. I'm just...
If
We'll
you're
start
gonna
off
make a
every
joke, I'm
meeting like
hailing
that,
Queen.
Shamika. Yeah, no, that's the only reason I took on the secretary position, is because Shamika already had it. She did such a good job with it. I was like, oh, I can copy that.
You're doing a good job. You are.
Thanks.
You are. I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore. Let's just say that. I loved it, but I'm glad it's over with.
Oh, I will be happy to pass the baton myself.
Hey, Jennifer, I'm sorry. Jennifer, there is one more thing I forgot to tell you.
Yes.
Because we do have so many new members on the committee, legal from TEA does want to do the training again.
Okay.
We'll keep it, to the point and concise, but
right.
just, the training about what the CAC does and
Sure.
so forth. So that'll be for July as well.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
And if you already answered this and you need to tell me off record, you can do that too, because I did have to take a quick call earlier. As a subcommittee member, is it just, is someone is out to the group? Is there a certain amount of times you're supposed to meet? Is there
No,
those kind of
that is
expectations?
purely at the discretion of the subcommittee. Y'all can meet daily for all I care. You might get a little overwhelmed, but I'm sure it would be a rollicking time.
And then is there a template that we are bringing back as far as what the,
No, you're,
Okay.
this is simply your recommendations for the body on the whole to consider as we're making this report.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will say, this is Agatha. I will say that it is helpful within the subcommittees to kind of maybe just nominate someone that's kind of the figurehead that will, you know, keep the notes or, you know, be the one that presents, you know, the information, sends things to the chair, you know, schedules.
Agatha, we do need to put in for the July meeting that TEA is going to be doing a training.
Do I put that?
Keith, do we need to put that in? Or do we just need to have that for the agenda? Does that have?
I think that, yeah.
All righty.
I'm taking this section as things that we're requesting from them and things that we would like to be on the agenda. And then there's what TEA needs to be put in.
Okay.
So
Rock
I think
on.
that there's two things, yeah.
All right.
So,
Are there any further corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, this chair will entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I move to accept the minutes.
Barbie?
Yep.
I'll second. This is Amy.
Barbie already did, dear. With the minutes approved, if there is no further business before the continuing advisory committee, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
Yes, move to adjourn. Let's.
Shamika, did I hear you second that?
Yes.
All righty.
I do have one quick question though. What time is the meeting going to be on July 13th?
9 a.m.
To what time?
I believe we have it scheduled for 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Keith, now would be a fine time to correct me.
Yeah, I think that's what y'all talked about. Do you still want to do a hybrid meeting in July? Or do you want to do all face-to-face?
Let's do a hybrid for July. We had already discussed that in our last meeting from what my notes say.
Okay.
What our emails.
Okay, and ESC 13 could not schedule the rooms for the fall yet.
Okay.
Maybe by July they'll be able to, but they couldn't
Okay.
as of April.
Okay, please do keep me updated on that. Well, obviously not Keith. Stephanie, if you could keep in contact with me about that, I would certainly appreciate it. With that, the Continuing Advisory Committee for Special Education stands and adjourned. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for your hard work.
All right. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.